we go. Recording started. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our monthly Maker Roundtable. I'm excited. I haven't been here in a few months, so I'm excited. I've had to catch up on the recordings. So it's always nice to join the group in person. So Scout, Naomi, thank you for holding down the fort for those couple months while I had other schedules that popped up.
We are glad to have you back.
I am glad to be back for sure. This is one when I see I'm about to miss it, I get that little like, oh, I can't believe I'm about to miss this because I like this so much. Scout, why don't you tell us who we have joining us on our official agenda for the day, and then we'll dive into kind of free flowing stuff.
Right. Well, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce you to Amelia Glenn, who I have yet to meet before 2 minutes ago. But so Amelia, you're a Pitt student, or you just in conjunction with Tech Owl? Why don't you just tell us about what you're doing?
Right.
And I will stop fumbling.
Me and my teammates, we are Pitt undergrad students. I'm a mechanical engineer. We also have a bio-e and a material scientist on the team. But over the summer, backtrack a little bit. We all took this class called The Art of Making. And the subtitle to it is An Introduction to Hands-on System Design and Engineering. And it's all about making products that can actually help people. And how do you talk to people and understand what they need and make something for them, essentially. So over the summer, we started working on a project with this professor who taught that. And we were like looking for things that could help people, maybe niche stuff, maybe big stuff, whatever. And we started talking to Tech Owl as well. They are Pennsylvania's AT3 program. And they have a program called Create Together, which is basically creating new assistive tech things for people, like specific to that person, special request type things. And they put us in contact with someone named Mandy Parker, who is a assistive tech specialist. I forget her exact title, at Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia. And she had a few patients that used mouse sticks, but they couldn't, they didn't have good holders. They were poor to attach to their beds and their wheelchairs. They got in the way of the nurses. They got in the way of the patients. It was just an all around a bad thing. So she had talked to Tech Owl, and Tech Owl talked to us saying, hey, why don't you work on this? So that's how we started working on this. And ever since then, we've been reaching out feelers for users and stuff so that we can talk to, and also trying to make these things. So we reached out to Missouri, and Scout's one of the people that talked to us, asking if people had any contacts that would be willing to talk to us about using mouse sticks, whether they be actual users or experts in the field, and maybe any input on what we've designed so far.
Well, it sounds really interesting, and I did reach out to a guy I've worked with off and on for years, who he was an original. Before I worked at Missouri Assistive Technology, I was working with this guy, and he uses a mouth stick and has a holder in the middle of his tray. And he's also a guy that likes to go out, say in the evenings, say to maybe a bar. And the way he accesses his phone, of course, is with his mouth stick. But he wouldn't take it when he went out in the evening for fear if he perhaps went off a curb or did something that, his driving may have been a little impaired, he would impale himself. Yeah. So anything, and he's got lots of opinions on mouth sticks and holders. So I'm hoping that he will talk to you because he likes using a mouth stick, but any improvements I think would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be great. Amelia, do you happen to have examples sitting around right underneath your camera right now that you could show us?
I actually forgot to grab them from the room that's downstairs, but I do have pictures of them.
Do you pictures that you can share your screen and show?
Yes.
Oh, wait a second. Let me turn on the share screen so you can do that. Yeah, go ahead. It's on if you want to share.
So, so this is from a presentation that we showed Tech Owl. These are 3 different versions of it. The one on the far right with the ice cream scoop title that's based off of one that Mandy showed us that she made. It was actually a fishing rod holder that she 3D printed and then literally sawed holes in, which is kind of funny to us. But it's basically just a rod that can hold the mouth stick. The waffle cone is the similar idea of just stick it in, but it's a different shape, maybe easier to grab stuff. The taco shell, I actually don't know if this presentation has it, but there's a video of one of my teammates, yeah, there it is, using it that I think is very useful.
Oh,
Love it.
Yeah, so the general idea is that there's magnets hidden in it, and then there's a magnetic thread wired around her little fake mouth stick that sticks onto it and goes out. When we were talking to Mandy, she was like, yeah, we kind of avoid magnets, but it's a cool idea.
It is a cool
So
idea.
it might be useful for non-hospital settings.
Yeah. Yeah, those darn
Ah.
hospitals, they're trying to stay away from magnets, I guess, right? Around people.
Yeah.
yeah, but it is interesting for sure.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the environment the person finds themselves in, that might be a perfect solution. I mean, if I'm
Right.
sitting at my desk using my mouth stick, and maybe that magnetic part is perfect. I mean, that setup right there from the video is great.
And I'm thinking about my guy. If he's outside on a bumpy road, it would probably fall off. But even if it was J-shaped, and you could just have a magnet, but set it in there and have a little tray.
Mhm.
I don't know. Just you could have different holders for different situations.
Yeah, I like the
We
idea.
also had my friend Shelby test it. I don't have a video of her testing it, but she has muscular dystrophy. So she isn't quite to the point where she need a mouse stick all the time, but she volunteered to test it. And that's her mom helping her use the cone one. And she said the cone one was better for her at specific angles just because of how she could pick it up and out. But she also has a little bit more movement than some people might.
That's great. That's awesome. So I guess, Amelia, as you talk about kind of your next steps for your project, what would you want to get out there to people? What would help you guys help others? Are you looking for people to try them out? Are you looking to just get the word out that you guys are there? How can we help?
Yeah, the main thing we're looking for right now is people that can help us test these. We have several versions of them. We ship things to Mandy, we ship things to Shelby. Right now, everything is in cardstock and stuff, and we have vague CAD models, but we don't want to start printing those until we know that these work for more than just Shelby or just Mandy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
The
great.
general end goal would be something open source that we can give to Tech Owl and then other places that could help 3D print them for people.
Yeah. Yeah, which would make tons of sense, because if those things were open source, and all of us at the different ATACs could start producing those, Scout or us or anybody else, as we go out and just go into the community and just give them, you need a mouth stick holder, great, here you go, here they are. That's kind of the whole idea of getting the word out. That's awesome. Anybody else in the group, comments or thoughts for Amelia? Please share.
Yeah, I just would like to say that I think the magnet idea is just fantastic, and that should somehow be part of all of the mounting methods. That should be an option there, because especially with those super magnet types, they don't have to be very big.
Yeah.
And it provides that extra level of stability.
Yeah.
That just being in a holder wouldn't provide. And it provides sort of like a sweet spot as well. So the degree to which the holder targets the magnets even.
Yeah.
So I was thinking more of a V than just a semicircle for the taco. That really takes you to those magnets. That's really very creative there.
Yeah, I really like that too,
It's
Ken.
excellent.
I was
The only-
watching you, Ken, as you were saying that, and I was like, oh yeah, he likes that one. And I agree. I really like that idea, Ken, of the kind of funneling the mouth stick into a very secure spot at kind of the bottom of that V, which would be really nice. Yeah, I really like that magnet one. I think it's great. I love the idea of it.
The only problem with the magnets is if you use any kind of medical device that's turned on with a magnet, you can't use it.
Correct.
There's the hospital issue again, right? Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
certain shunts too. And that's
yeah,
right in
yeah,
that.
yeah, and
So-
definitely we'd have to make sure as
But
we went to
still a
approach
cool
something
idea.
like that. Yeah, it's still a really cool idea.
And if you add that J to the bottom, if it did bump up, at least they can still retrieve.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of our versions, I totally forgot to grab it. Maybe if I have time next month, I'll find it. But it's a wood thing. It literally has Play-Doh in a shape like this. So it doesn't quite work because you can't really hold much weight on it, but it does have kind of a lip on the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Did you say it was Play-Doh?
Yep, it is wood and Play-Doh.
He says with no judgment in his voice, by the way, too. He's all for it. I mean, he just wants to clarify.
I was just clarifying.
Prototyping, cheap prototyping. So
Prototyping,
I love
exactly.
it.
Start
Yeah.
with Play-Doh, work to modeling clay, go from
Right.
there. Yeah, it makes
That-
sense.
What's that? Model Magic. I've
Yeah,
used
model
that
magic.
to-
That's right.
to start. Yeah.
It's also way easier for users to say, no, I need it to be at a different angle, and you can just flip the Play-Doh up versus
Yep.
it's 3D printed like this.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Oh.
Anybody else? Other thoughts for Amelia? Other things you'd like to share? Do you have people who might want to be testers? We'll go that route too. Amelia, at some point, drop your info into the chat so people have it.
Yeah.
And that way, if they think of somebody, like anything else, will it never fails. We'll leave the moment and everybody be like, oh, I know exactly who I should have said. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that we'll think of people or come across folks, and we can just kind of send them your way.
Yeah, right. Awesome.
What is your time frame for this project, Amelia?
Well, me and one of my group mates are seniors, but the general idea, it's not really a senior design project, not really a class project, more of a background project. How can we help people? How can we build more things? Because that's what we like to do.
That's great. Amelia,
So
to
no
give you
specific time frame, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Amelia, give you a couple resources that might be interesting to connect your group to the larger community. Is if you want to search out Makers Making Change, if you haven't yet, they're awesome, and they might even have some local chapters that are close to you that you might be able to connect with. And also AT Makers is another group. That's awesome.
And what's the Facebook group? 18 makers and users?
Is that what their Facebook group is? I will now show my disdain for Facebook and say I don't know because I don't go on.
If you're
Facebook.
talking about Bill, it's just 18 makers.
Is it just AT Makers? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I follow the website and the Twitter handle. I don't follow the Facebook group, even though the Facebook group has got a lot of people in it.
Yeah, it is called 18 makers and users.
Okay.
I think they changed it, Lori, from makers to makers and users. But
When they got, then they kept getting bumped off as a company. Okay.
Okay.
Facebook kept throwing them out because they thought they were a company.
That's just made me laugh.
Just one thing that's been kind of bouncing around my head as far as the mouse stick holder is I saw you had like 3 example magnets in there, and depending on the orientation of the holder, say it's vertical rather than horizontal, it might be nice as part of the way that you engage and disengage the mouse stick is that it engages and disengages through kind of a tip rotation. So you break one of the magnets before you break the others. Then you can have a fair number of magnets in there holding it in place, but you don't have to fight to get it off the magnets. So it somehow, it would have a little receiver that rotates away from a base. So it breaks the top magnet connection first, then the second, then the third. You just may find that you may need ways to sequentially break the magnet connections. Just a
That's-
mechanical thought.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really interesting, right?
Yeah.
I love doing these things because now I remember how much I love being here for these, because I find myself now I'm just staring up in the sky thinking about that, like what that looks like, Ken, as you start to build that. Yeah, like that kind of this pivot joint that pulls it away from the top magnets first.
I just remember when I was a kid, they had a Wild West show, a TV show where the fast gun in the show had a special holster for his guns. And you didn't pull it out and point, you just swung it directly up and the front of the holster broke open. And that's what I thought of when I thought of this thing, is a special kind of holster for it that breaks open in the front as you break. But of course, that's not necessary here. But if it ever,
But
in a
super
race,
cool.
get a mouse
But
stick out.
super cool, Ken. Let's admit that it's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know the name of the show that has that, just so I can look at the picture?
I wish. I wish.
Oh my God. I'm so fighting the urge right now to go onto the internet and search, but I'll do that later. Because yeah, that would be, it's interesting, that idea of yeah, not fighting the release, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's a really good point, is that with a lot of these, we're working constantly with projects like this and with products like this to find that balance of providing stability but making it easy enough for somebody to grab and use, right? So there's always that fine line, and that's why I could see that whole idea of releasing in a sequence really
Mhm.
helping, because I think of some of the individuals that I've worked with who might not have the strength to break the magnet.
Or even if they do, not repeatedly.
Yeah, right,
know,
exactly.
yeah.
Like depending on the day and the time of day and things that are
Mhm.
happening. Yeah, I could see almost that being the barrier.
Right. So now we all know, the rest of us, why Mike really doesn't come to every one of these groups, is because he's gone for the rest of the day down these rabbit holes.
I mean, there is something to be said there, Scott, right? Because I've forgotten how now I'll sit here all day and I'll just kind of fade off. I'll just kind of think about that. That's good. Amelia, you've stoked my engineer heart today, and that makes me happy. That is great. It's lost me, like Scott said, for the rest of the day, for all of the dumb administrative work I have to do for the rest of the day when we're off this. I'm completely shattered for that. Oh, that's
All right.
great. So
Well,
Amelia, will you be willing to ship these things beyond your borders of Pennsylvania there?
Yeah, we actually have a little bit of a budget from the professor that we've been talking to for shipping things around and buying like basic construction materials. So we're happy to ship things wherever we can.
Okay, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, because we'll put the word out across New Jersey, and see if there's individuals who might want to participate, and maybe we can collaborate with you to figure out a way to get stuff to them, so it doesn't always just fall on you guys. Because I do like this idea of building this collaboration.
Yeah. And Ken, you might want to just turn away for a minute, because Amelia, before you get into 3D production, have you used products like Instamorph?
No, I have not heard of that.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, unfortunately, it costs so much more than 3D printed devices.
It does, yeah. So there is that part.
Yeah, the only reason I
But
say
if
is
you
because,
mold you can remold it at least
Exactly.
until you
Right.
get your prototype, and then
yeah, and it's you don't have to have a design so much. So if you can see, these are just beads. They're just plastic pellets. And it's super easy. It's not your best solution long-term, I freely admit, but it's an easy way to form something for a prototype.
Yeah, it is a great prototyping tool for sure.
Like it, just comes in different size bags.
What exactly is that used? Is it basically like Play-Doh?
In a way,
It's your
Yeah,
moldable
It's a-
medium that you're using your Play-Doh for now. But what would happen is it would harden and give you the stability that you're not getting right now from your Play-Doh.
almost instantly. You need a hot water source to use it. You need to
Right.
melt it in
We
hot
have plenty
water
of that.
and then, knead it up a little and then mold what it is you want. And then you can either dunk it in cold water to speed it up or wait a few minutes and it becomes a solid, usable, washable item.
yeah, chunk of plastic.
Just don't put it in the dishwasher.
Yeah, that's not good.
What it's
There's
really
a
great
word for
for
that
is,
type of plastic, but I've totally forgotten it.
Yeah.
what it's really great for is organic shapes.
Mm.
So if you're trying to create a one-off that has to have a very specific organic shape, maybe fit directly to someone's body part, that is good for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. And I have seen people take kind of an Instamorph shape and do some measurements of it and replicate that in a 3D print.
Mhm.
It sometimes loses that organic feel to it though, Ken, you know what I mean? It kind of smooths out the edges a lot of times. And sometimes it's those ridges of that organic shape that become the key for when
Right.
you make something. And that's what makes it so nice.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of handy, but it's got its specific place.
Yeah.
For replication, 3D printing is going to be your key.
Yeah. Still another good thing to keep in your
Yeah, we
little
will.
building toolbox.
Yeah.
The bag I last ordered was $36 on Amazon.
How big of a bag?
How big?
I think it was medium bag. So what bag do you have there, Scott? The white bag?
Both mine, they're 12-ounce bags, and I probably paid, probably 10 or so
Yeah,
bucks
yeah.
for
So
them.
my
Everything-
bags, I
everything
have
has
a
gone
bigger
up.
bag, but yeah,
Yeah.
anywhere from $10 to $25 for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also forgot how much I enjoy when Scout just disappears from the camera and he comes back with something that's sitting on the ground there. And I also forgot how much I enjoy that. So this has really been it's been a reawakening of making sure I clear my schedules on these Wednesdays to do this.
It is very good that my camera has one angle. My office is like not anything anybody wants to see.
I know. I have the same thing. I'm presenting at a conference on Saturday. It's run by ISTE, and it's called the Creative Constructor Conference. So all about making and education and things like that. And we're doing a session about inclusive making, thinking about all the individuals of different abilities that you might see in your schools, as well as kind of focusing your maker activities to real world authentic problems, like what Amelia just talked about, right? That whole idea of solving a problem that has, I hate to say a purpose, but a bit of a purpose. Sometimes we see maker programs and they're just making for the sake of making, keychains and nonsensey kind of little things like that. And so part of our session is we're going to send the people off to make things. We're going to give them some scenarios of people that might have some kind of issue in a classroom, struggling to read a paper book, struggling to hold something, like those kinds of things. And so I've been collecting, and I can't show you because I don't want to, because it's a mess. I have a whole pile on the floor next to my desk of things that I've been collecting throughout the past week, so that when we get to the making part of that, we can all pick up a box of just nonsense and drop it on our desk and make something. And so, Scout, I feel very akin to your office right now. I don't normally have a big box of just pieces. I leave that in my basement. So kind of fun. And that was as we go continue through our conversation here, the one thing I did have on my schedule is related to that on my agenda. If you have resources that are about making for a purpose or inclusive making, and you want to drop them in the chat, I would love to add them to the resource list I'm putting together. I've added this, that we do these monthly so people can come. Amelia, do you have like a link to a page about your project?
I don't have a link to a page about our project, but I do remember a article from the Pitt magazine about a project also sponsored by our professor. This one's about, it's called Vibrance. It's basically, there's a school for deaf children in Pittsburgh, and they went to that school and made backpacks essentially that enabled them to better incorporate music and such into their curriculum by making vibrations that they could actually feel.
Cool.
Pretty cool.
That's really cool. Yeah. If you have a link to that, throw it in the chat. I'd love to add that to the resource that we're going to give people, because the hope is within an hour, we're going to spark an interest and then give them some more resources to go down kind of a rabbit hole. Ken, thank you. You were already in there, Ken. I had your resource already. So you were there, which was awesome. Yeah, I have that. AT Makers Making Change. I have all of the links to our videos from the past few months, just to give them kind of a sense. I did searches on Thingiverse and Instructables for assistive technology and gave them those kind of playlist of ideas, just so that they start thinking a little differently about that. Feels like an interesting opportunity to broaden people's thoughts about what making really is. And so we're kind of excited about that as an opportunity to be in front of a group who normally wouldn't be in a session focused on assistive technology or things like that. So we're going to kind of sneak up on them and then drop an assistive technology bomb on them, which is kind of exciting. I'm looking forward to that.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
This may be a bit of a nit, but I feel the need for people who aren't necessarily trying to design and aren't necessarily trying to simply print, for lack of a better technology, a solution that's already out there on Thingiverse or something.
Mm-hmm.
But people who take the middle step, which is they take a designer, which is what my site is all about, and customize a final design. But that knowledge of using the designer to create that final design and then implement it in a physical object, that's a skill as well.
It is.
So I would love to see people who don't view themselves as inherently designers,
mm-hmm.
or just don't want to just be a 3D printer.
Right.
But people who want to, get out there, gather requirements, provide input to the designer, produce results, cycle through as if something doesn't fit as expected.
Right.
That's another thing to offer people who you may talk to.
I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of times we talk about this, and if we look back to what Amelia was talking about, this idea, this iterative process, we just iterating new versions of things, trying. I was almost going to call it, Ken, tinkering, but it's beyond that. I almost feel like tinkering diminishes it in a bit. But it is that idea of taking something and finding a way to massage it to work for someone else, and that kind of embracing that creativity and that problem solver mentality, right? I do think you're right. There are those extremes. There are individuals, and that's fine, who just want to print things. It's already done. They just want to print them. I have a printer. I want to send a bunch of stuff to it. And that's cool. I mean, that's fine, because ultimately that might get things out in the community. But I think, don't you think, Ken, a lot of people probably fit into that middle part that you just talked about?
I think a lot of therapists and caregivers fit into that middle part. In fact, because you don't have to have a 3D printer, because they're available through your library or online services, that middle part is the key part.
Yeah.
That middle part is the part that says, this is actually going to get used. Yeah. And it's going to actually meet somebody's need. It's going to fit them rather than they fit the device.
I 100% agree with you, Ken. I think there are a number of people who say, this is the device, mm-hmm. and it doesn't fit, so it's not the device for my person or for me. Instead of saying, this is the device, how can I modify? And it's a group that is saying, oh, if I can, massage this, it'll work for my person. I've done a couple of presentations where, like, this is the device and here are variations, because I want people to start thinking about, like, how can I change this for my person or for me?
Yeah.
that I hadn't really thought of it as a middle group, but I think that makes good sense.
It makes tons of sense. And it's almost like Scout. You think about, this is not the device. It's saying to someone, this is a device. Now talk about what the individual you're working with needs, and is there a way to make another device?
Mhm.
And what I'm trying to say, Mike, too, is I'm also going to help you narrow your design realm a bit.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a designer.
Yeah.
All you got to do is plug in some parameters into the designer that are specific to your user,
Yeah.
and out comes something that should fit them. And if not, go back and modify the parameters.
Right.
So you don't have any work to sit up front and say, well, I know that I have a final output I want.
Mhm.
What are some other versions? No, let me take you step by step through this process. But yeah, there's a learning curve here. You have to learn the process.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Exactly. And I think that's really powerful, because I think that we want to empower that person, that kind of middle ground person, that therapist or that family member, or even the individual themselves, who has a sense of what they want to see happen, but has no sense of how to make that happen at times. And that's what the designer, Ken, is so great about, is because you're right. You're prompting people to kind of fill in the details and then watch what happens at the end. And that can be really powerful, because I think sometimes, we see, professionals or family members, community members, whoever they may be, stuck in that middle piece of having a nugget of an idea that just kind of sits there because they have no next step. Like, all right, well, what do I do? Or how do I take this and find a way to make something out of it? Not necessarily create, because, there'll be times where people will say, I'm not a builder. I can't build things, which is crazy because everybody can build stuff. But instead they, I have this idea, but I don't know how to make it a reality. And I think there's a lot of those products sitting around in people's brains, half developed. Those individuals latch on to somebody who's willing to build something. And they latch into them, and then what do? They do kind of an idea dump, right? I wish I could dig up a picture, and I'm having such a hard time that, before the times of having a camera in your pocket all the time, where we have pictures of everything, I can't find a picture of the truck that I used to drive around our state in as I was working and doing these kind of building things, where it was a giant box truck. My neighbors hated it because it was sitting in front of my house every day. Giant box truck with a full working workshop in the back. And we would do that. We had contracts, and we would drive around New Jersey to schools and organizations and even some state agencies, and talk with people, the consumers, the people working with them, the family members. They would describe what they wanted, and then we would leave. We'd go out in the parking lot, and you'd hear the door pull back down, and then all these tools would run, dust would shoot out the bottom of the door, and you'd pull open the door, and you just have this thing that you created, and you would give it to them. And if it worked, fantastic. If it didn't, you went back out to the truck. And that was how I spent my day. That was one of my first jobs in this field. And I look back at that now, where we're at with, Instamorph, 3D printers, and all these other great tools. If I had had that, first of all, I'd have a much smaller truck, which would have been awesome. And second of all, I could have made really much more developed solutions. I feel a lot of the solutions that we created were wood and plastic and foam and, things like that. And so they had a certain kind of prototypey look to them. And we tended to only build one thing, and we never saw a second one, right? It was, this person had an issue, we built something, we gave it to you, and we drove away. And so somebody says, well, can you show us one? Well, no, we'd have to go find that person, and we'd have to get it back from them to take a picture. But that's that middle person taking in a lot of input from people and then creating something from it. I'll have to
It
find
sounds
those.
fun.
Oh, it was a blast. I mean, it was so much fun. And just the idea of what could that look like now? I mean, that could be a little tiny panel van with a 3D printer and some other tools in it, and you could start working on that. Now you'd have to sit in the parking lot and 3D
Right.
print for a while, which would be interesting.
That's the point where the Play-Doh and the Instamorph comes in.
I was just about to say, Amelia, right? That's your Play-Doh Instamorph piece where you get something together and then you take it back to maybe print it as you go. But I just always remember that job, and it was so ahead of its time because of that kind of concept of just building something that didn't exist.
So,
And
so Mike, I also want to kind of critique what you're doing too.
please,
So what you're doing is building one-offs
yeah,
for one person.
yeah,
And that is part of your story even. So if I use as an example the key guard designer,
hmm,
it already has, you have a purpose in mind, but it's just way too hard to build that from scratch without a whole lot of other skills.
right,
And when you're done, if you do a lot of the stuff that you see on Thingiverse, you got one design for one tablet, for one app, for one case, blah, blah, blah.
correct.
The designer says, no, you tell me some things and
Mhm.
I'll produce that final thing for you. So you're in the domain
Yeah,
of key guards to start with. You're not building a chair with this
Mhm.
designer. But you don't have to have all those additional skills. You do have to have communication and measurement and
Right.
other skills like that.
right,
And best of all, you're not producing the designer itself isn't a one-off. It's an all-off,
yeah, right.
as long as you stay in that domain.
Yeah, I agree. And I welcome your critique and agree with it that, I don't know that that was the best way to do things. You're right, because this was constantly recreating from scratch something
Right.
and then never to see it again.
And having a
so-
lot of talent built into that guy who can create that thing. And
Yeah, but then there's not, but you could also argue, if I was to reflect back on my time in the truck, a lot of wasted time building the same thing over and over, slightly different, and spent a lot of time doing that. So yeah, I get what you're saying about the designer, and I agree 100%. This idea of changing the inputs to get a different output and making it something that is easy to move through. You said key guards. I started to have like an emotional moment over here. I've spent many a day carving out key guards. That to this day, anytime someone says key guard, you didn't see me do it, but I rub my hand because it's where I have the scar from the 20 stitches in my hand from
wow.
making a key guard in the back of a van. And the drill hooked the piece of plastic and the whole thing spun around and it sliced my whole arm, my whole hand open.
I
And
have a
I want it to be
similar
known on the
injury for the
recording.
same reason.
Yeah, I wanted to be known on the recording. Did I finish the key guard? I did. I took a paper bag and I duct taped it around my hand to keep it from bleeding. And then I finished the key guard. And then I went to the hospital when I was done.
Well, Mike, did I ever show you this little owie I have here where I accidentally touched the extruder on the 3D printer?
Nice.
We all have stories.
I love them, right? Who doesn't love a good scar story, right? I feel like I was flashing back to Jaws right now when they're in the boat.
I was.
Comparing
I was.
scars. It's so funny. So Amelia got some couple resources in the chat for you. I saw you put yours in there, which is awesome. Thank you. That helps. And I'll add that to the list I'm pulling together. And I'll share the Wakelet with us the next time, or I'll put it into the notes for this recording when I drop it online when it's done too, so everybody can get to it. Awesome. Other things that people have to chat about.
I was just wondering if Jesse, Beth, or Maria have anything they want to.
Yeah, please join the fun.
Yeah. Oh,
Hi, Beth. Hi, Beth.
I've just been enjoying listening.
Hi, Jesse.
Everybody's like war wounds.
What do you got?
Yeah.
Share yours. Tell us
Right.
about it.
I don't have any good AT ones yet. That's a little ominous. Maybe I will.
Well, I hope not. My fingers are crossed for you that you don't.
Yeah,
I
I've
always-
also been enjoying listening. I was just driving between appointments to deliver some AT. I'm an AT specialist, and I was able to take you along on the drive to listen
Nice.
along.
Excellent.
Very
Jesse,
nice.
where are you from?
I'm Boston.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Do you work for a school? Do you work for an organization? Where do you work?
Oh, I work at Easter Seals.
Oh, awesome. Excellent.
Very good.
Easter Seals, the Massachusetts AT Act project, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm out in the ATRC there quite often.
Nice. Nice. Look at us, all the represented. That's great. Very good. Excellent. Yeah, well, these are fun. I mean, this is pretty much how these go. And I do enjoy them as we have a conversation. I always, the thing that I have on my little card that I always wanted to say as we go is, does anybody want to share something they created recently? Kind of a why you created it and what you created?
I can share something, Mike, if you have
Please.
a minute.
Yeah.
So in the last call, I think I shared some of the stuff I was doing in a project with some teachers of visually impaired for bliss symbol based tactile symbols.
Mhm.
And I've also been working with the Bliss Communications International Organization to just get their blessing and their support, even though tactile isn't where they've been headed up until now. And I showed them just some of the stuff that I had done as part of this project. So here's an example of a tactile shape built out of bliss symbols. So each one of these is a bliss symbol. And one of the teachers that I was working with in the spring said, oh, you can make a puzzle out of that. And so I sat down with Fusion 360, and it was a pain, and created puzzle pieces that you could fill in the slots with.
Oh, that's great.
But I realized that that's not my goal, is for me to ever be part of the loop,
Right.
or to require skills that are just too difficult for a lot of people to pick up. Those people in that middle ground.
Yeah.
I want teachers and therapists and parents and caregivers, whatever, to be able to do this. So I enhanced an existing tool I have to create puzzles that where you just fundamentally are working with SVG files. And in this case, again, it's bliss symbols, but and then with just a little bit of setting of parameters and saying, well, this is a piece, the backing on this piece needs to be this number of millimeters by this number of millimeters. You got pieces, whoops, you have pieces and a backing.
Yeah.
And with a change of one parameter, you can scale this
Okay.
as well. So if you don't like this size, you get a different scale. But again, it's all based on SVG files. So while I have SVG files for all the bliss symbols, if you had some other kind of puzzle you wanted to create, a very simplistic puzzle that you wanted to create a physical example of and create maybe a static example of, that tool will support you in the process of building the 3D printable model.
I love it. I love that idea of thinking about just even Ken, like tactile graphics, that you could create a tactile representation of something through pieces, right? Yeah, I think that's so cool.
Really quick, I've got to head to my next class. Thank you so much for inviting me. These are monthly, right?
These are monthly,
Because this has
yes.
been really fun. All right. Then I will hopefully
Great.
see you next month if I can find the time.
Awesome. Very good.
Thanks
Thanks,
for
Amelia. I
joining.
appreciate your time. I always smile anytime somebody goes, I have to go to class. I don't know, it made me smile. I just so that's cool. So Ken, what's the next step for those?
So like I said, I used an existing tool to do this, to add this functionality. Now I have to go through and make sure I didn't break anything in that tool by adding the new functionality.
Yeah.
And then I have a meeting at the end of the month with my TBI SLP group, and I'm going to show this to them. I have a little bit of creativity and a fair amount of engineering. The group I'm working with, I'm hoping, has a tremendous amount of creativity. So what I'd love to see are lots of different puzzle designs.
Yeah.
And again, with the hope that they would support a curriculum or a lesson plan.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's taking this concept of yours and finding a way to build it into an experience they already had, that they would like to see this other avenue, this other option
Right.
of this different representation, which is so cool. That's awesome.
So I mean, the end result is you teaching children how to communicate.
Yeah.
So just give them as many kind of supports as you can to entice them into this world, to support their learning. And if puzzles are the way to do it, then that's what you need to come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great approach. That idea, that kind of puzzle approach to it, I think is really cool. That's awesome. I can't wait to see how that goes. All right. So by next time you'll have some updates to share.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very cool. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. Anybody else, something you're working on that you want to share? Scout, you working on anything? I just want to see you bend down and pick something up again. I just assumed if I asked you, you'd bend down and you'd find something.
I was actually thinking beforehand, I'm like, I don't know what I've been doing, but I'm not working on anything right now. If I bend down, I'm going to pick up a rock next. So
so hopefully by next time I'll have some experiences from what we did in our maker session. Hopefully we'll get some good experiences and get people thinking a little bit about a different way to approach this. So yeah, excellent. Anybody else, something you'd like to share? Beth?
Nothing really new, but I was just, as you guys were talking about this idea of a middle group, I think as I teach entry-level OT students, and that's what we're trying to do. I think, I don't know, I guess that just really resonated. I'm trying to make them not so afraid to, experiment and figure out what's going to work better. I'm astounded at how many of them come in scared of any kind of tool. So we're working on that. Although I shouldn't tell them about these stories because then they'll be more
maybe keep those to a minimum.
Yeah.
It seems like also they would be afraid to fail. Like I think a lot of making is not making something right, and figuring it out and keep trying. And I think for students, I would think that would be hard to have 10 failures, and maybe never get it, but it can be part of the process.
Yeah, it's certainly part of the process, right? I mean, for sure. And I think Beth, the good thing is that you're working with OT students, and hopefully they're pretty creative anyway. Maybe they don't know it yet, but I feel like that probably drew them to that field. I constantly say when I go back to school to be a grown-up, I'm going to be an OT. I just feel like that was really such a cool profession.
Well, thanks. I think so too. But I used to work with a PT who used to say, yes, that was going to be her next. She was an OT at heart.
Yeah.
But I think they are creative. I think a lot of, and part of my frustration is realizing how many just creative skills I was taught in OT school that we've lost time for, that we don't have time to teach anymore. But just trying to say, like, you can use these tools, and if you screw this up, that's okay. If you make a project that's wonky and a little bit shaky, that's okay, because it's your first shot. And
I think a lot of the people coming up into college now don't have the experiences we had. I learned how to run tools and things from my dad. That's what we did on our weekends together. We were down in the basement, and I had shop class and CAD class and home ec and sewing. And if I didn't have that home ec course, I wouldn't be able to cook anything because my mother couldn't even cook spaghetti, So, and so many of these kids now that I'm encountering as coming in as volunteers and interns, and even my older Girl Scouts, they don't have any of these failed experiences where they have failed, you know? So we're actually getting them greener than they used to be.
Mm.
I do a lot every year. I kind of do the like quick, like, okay, how many of you used a sewing machine in school? I have had adult master students look at me like I was handing them a chainsaw when I said we're gonna
It's all
sew.
gone from my school system.
It's it's wild to me how terrified they are of a sewing machine. So we work on that. Yeah, but much less like, all right, let's fire up the bandsaw, and then like it's like deer in headlights. But
I mean,
you're
what
right. It's a lot of that's gotten pulled out of just
Yeah.
the K-12 system.
Mhm.
They don't have the exposure.
They don't have any kind of exposure anymore.
Yeah.
Another thing to think about is just, the different backgrounds. I can remember being that entry level OT student as well. I'm an OT too. And we had an assistive technology class that was an elective as part of our program. And one thing that they did, it was cross-listed with human factors engineering. And they paired an engineering student with an OT student. And it was interesting. I was someone who felt very comfortable playing with power tools and, doing all of these things at the beginning. But most of our OT classmates really weren't. It just wasn't a background that a lot of people had. And the engineering students often did. So they paired people together in part because they wanted people with those different experiences to kind of work together and feel a little bit more comfortable bringing different things to the table, and then also realizing, okay, maybe I can use the power tools as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting when you see some programs in schools, they have their maker spaces. And just, the space is one thing. But what I always kind of dial into is the person who's in charge of that space and their philosophy. Because I think what we're talking about now is someone's philosophy of what it means to make something. And it's more than just having a 3D printer. It is having some of these other skills. And Beth, when you said sewing, I mean, that's one of my favorite skills that I have now, is to know how to use a sewing machine and to create things with a sewing machine. And you don't see that a lot. And sometimes in some of these maker spaces, I do see it. I'm really excited when you see a sewing machine and some foam and some carving stations for foam and things like that. And just the different approaches, some power tools, not a ton, but some, as they start to think about how they put stuff together. And I think those are really such powerful skills. We actually have a maker storefront here, and it's in one of our downtown areas, and it's a storefront. You walk into it and it is a maker space for the community, and it has those kinds of stations where you can, you sign your life away saying, if I cut my own arm off with the bandsaw, so be it. But after that, you're free to pretty much use anything you want in there and make something, and it has all those pieces that are so critical to this idea. Sometimes you just need to sew something. You need to sew a strap, or you need to sew Velcro onto something. You need to know how to do that. We can't have that be the piece that derails the whole project, right? Like, oh no, I can't put a strap on this, so we're done.
No, I'm into making non painful PEX books at this point. I was going to say something else, but I chose better of it.
But again, thinking about that, and maybe
soft.
those are our entrances to bring other people into this, is, you tap into something that they're really passionate about. And you show them how they could be the person, Ken's middle ground person, who brings this idea and helps it come to fruition. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, guys, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Other thoughts before we go? What do you got, Scott?
I was just thinking, I've never made any AT with my chainsaw. What could I do and really challenge somebody?
Don't make me start looking up in the air and thinking about it. I love it. Just the other day, my wife saw me go out to the shed in the backyard, and I had a bunch of stuff in my hand. I was taking it out of my office and I was taking it to the shed. And she watched me walk through the yard. And then I closed the door to the shed and you didn't see me for like an hour. And when I came back in the house, she said, boy, I was really nervous. I didn't know what you were doing in there because you were gone for a long time. Thought you were just bringing that to the shed. And I was like, no, I made this. And I made this PVC thing to give to my daughter to put in her house for something. And it had other stuff attached to it. It was like a whole project, but yeah, you gotta love that.
Notably, she didn't come out to the shed to check.
He was like, he'll probably be fine. He's probably fine.
So
It's the smart move.
Yeah, right. She knew better. She just could have let me be. I'd like to think because I was quiet and I was out of the house. So it was perfect. I was out in the shed quietly sitting there, which is a good thing. Other thoughts before we wrap up? What I'll call another successful conversation. It's so much better to be part of it than just watch it. Because last ones I was watching it, I was chiming in over here at my desk, and then I'm just a guy sitting by himself talking to himself. So now at least I'm talking to other people.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. It's really fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. I'm trying to think of what our next date is. I don't know it off the top of my head, but if you just kind of vamp for 2 seconds, I'll tell you. I'll even put the link to the sign up in the chat.
Yeah.
November 17th.
Naomi's on it.
Is Naomi on it? I enlarged my screen. Nice, Naomi. I'll do you one better, Naomi. How's that grab you? I put the link in there. There's the link to register. So hopefully you'll join us. And Naomi made it a bit.ly. So it's bit.ly/makerspaces. We'll take you to the page on our website that has the recording and all the links for the future ones.
All right.
All right, everybody. Well, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for your participation. And we'll see everybody in November.
Have a great week, everybody.
Have a great one,
everyone. Have a
guys.
good rest of the week.
Thanks, you too. See you later.
Bye, everybody.